Okay, so welcome back to another comparison. So today we're going to be looking at the Sennheiser HD560s, which is one of the latest and greatest headphones by Sennheiser, which received a lot of hype when they came out. And we're going to be comparing them to the Fidelios SHP9500 and the 9600. Now before we do begin, I'd like to go ahead and mention, go ahead and like, comment, and subscribe down below really quick. It really helps the channel out, and I'm actually starting to see quite a bit of growth recently, so you would be helping me out tremendously by doing that. Now with that out of the way, let's go ahead and begin. As far as the contents are concerned, who wins? Well, it depends on your perspective. All three headphones include very similar contents. However, I must add that the SHPs do come with a cheap protective sleeve that can be reused as a headphone dust cover when laying it down on a surface or hanging it for display. Now all three come with an adapter included, but the adapters themselves differ a little bit. More on that shortly. Other than that, everything else is exactly the same. A simple cardboard box, the safety guides, and nothing else. So now let's talk about the build quality. To be entirely honest, the SHPs actually trump the Sennheisers. Both of them do. They're all mostly made of plastic, and the plastic used on them feels about equally durable. However, an area where they differ is in the size adjustment mechanism. This is one of the most important areas of a headband, since it is where headphones tend to break the most. Both SHPs feature a metal size adjustment mechanism. Although they don't necessarily feel very premium, they definitely feel more durable than the plastic ones on the Sennheisers. That said, if you were to grab all three, hold them by the top of their respective headbands, and wiggle them a bit, it takes more effort to make the Sennheisers make that waka waka sound than with the SHPs. Now, the cable's materials are pretty much the same type of quality and the same type of material. In fact, this isn't even three different cables, it's the same cable. That's how similar they are. They're made of a basic type of rubber that doesn't necessarily feel premium, but they don't kink a lot either. I'd still recommend aftermarket cables though. It's gonna treat you much better than this. The main difference between each cable is that the SHPs feature 3.5mm tip ring sleeve to 3.5mm tip ring sleeve plugs, while the Sennheisers offer a 2.5mm twist lock tip ring sleeve to 1/4 inch tip ring sleeve cable. Now all three headphones come with an adapter, but the SHPs come with a 3.5mm to 1/4 inch adapter, while the Sennheisers offer a 1/4 inch to 3.5mm adapter. I personally prefer the 3.5 to 1/4 inch routes, as using this type of adapter is far less cumbersome in my experience. This type of adapter just kind of tends to weigh down on you, and it's not comfortable or preferable at all. So now let's go ahead and jump into comfort here. For first place, you're going to be tied with both SHPs. It really depends on your preference here. And dead last, you've got the Sennheisers. So both of the SHPs feature large cups, a lightweight design, and acceptable pads by most, and a reasonable clamp force. If you prefer a more relaxed clamp force for at-desk use, go with the 9500. If you prefer a slightly tighter fit for doing chores around the house and looking around, go with the 9600. Either way, they're both very comfortable. Now, the Sennheisers do feature the more comfortable pads, the slightly lighter weight, and still feature some pretty large cups. However, there is one major gripe I feel I must mention. These don't really feel like they were built for people with large heads, even though the size adjustment mechanism allows for such measurements. See? The cups themselves lay kind of weird on my head. The entirety of the pressure lies on the upper half of the pad, whereas the lower pad just kind of feels like it's floating there. It barely even feels like it's touching your head, if anything at all. So because of that, I can't wear them for prolonged periods of time. Now, I have an idea for a potential solution to that problem, but I am currently working on acquiring a particular item. So if it works, I'll be sure to post an update video for how to improve the comfort on the HD5XO line of headphones. For now though, no dice. So as far as amplification is concerned, I feel like I must mention mobile devices as well, since all of these are technically efficient enough to be able to be powered by a mobile device efficiently. So all three of these are exceptionally easy to run. On my Galaxy S20 Plus through a dongle, I run the Sennheisers at 8 out of 15 or 9 out of 15 depending on the track. I run the 9500s at 8 out of 15 or 9 out of 15 but I am more comfortable leaving it at 8 out of 15 than with the Sennheisers. And last of all, I run the 9600 at 8 out of 15 or 9 out of 15, but I am even more comfortable leaving the volume at 8 out of 15 than with the previous two headphones. Now, on my THX AAA 789 through single-ended, I run the Sennheisers at around 10:30 AM on gain 2. I can run the 9500s at around 9:30 AM on gain 2, but I prefer running them at 11:30 AM on gain 1 just because they sound a bit less intense that way. And same thing for the 9600s, 9:30 AM on gain 2, but I prefer 11:30 AM on gain 1. So finally, the sound portion. So before we begin, I do want to say that the following tests were performed without any EQ. My thoughts on EQ for these headphones will be discussed in the notes and observations portion of the review. So with that out of the way, let's go ahead and begin. So as far as the bass is concerned, there is quite a big difference between all three of these. The Sennheisers are without a doubt the winners of this category. The Sennheisers are the sophisticated rich person, in theory at least. The bass is professional and tame, yet very well textured and has excellent extension for the price. The 9500s are more of a budget version of that. The bass is still on the more tame side of things, although it does have a smidge of bloat going on. Not that it sounds bad, but it really puts into perspective how professional the Sennheiser's bass response sounds. So if you were to imagine both bass responses on a graph, you could easily imagine that the 9500's bass response is more curve-shaped, whereas the Sennheiser's response appears to be a bit more linear. The 9600, on the other hand, are a totally different story. The bass response is more elevated, much warmer, and does have the most amount of bloat among the three. So, for example, Zealots of Stockholm by Childish Gambino, at the minute 34 mark, the Sennheisers present the bass note very professionally. The timbre of the note is flat, with very detailed but no bloom, no bloat, no boom to it whatsoever. The 9500s reproduce this note with the same level of presence, but it is backed by a bit more warmth and power behind it. The 9600 are once again a whole nother story. The note is backed by more warmth and presence than the other two. I wouldn't entirely say the detail is missing, but it is definitely lacking compared to the other two. Out of all three, this bass response is the one that reminds me the most of a subwoofer in a car. Like, not necessarily in terms of quantities, but in terms of timbre. So at the 305 minute mark, the Sennheisers offer the best bass extension. Throughout the bass valley, it is easy to tell that the note just goes deeper, deeper, and deeper, until it simply stops, then picks up and recovers. With the 9600, you get a similar feel to that, particularly during the recovery. With the 9500, there is a more apparent roll-off. When it goes down, it simply fades into the abyss, and then it returns out of the blue. Now another example, Helena Beat by Foster the People. So I had to include this particular track because I actually came up with a really good comparison. On each headphone, the drum sounds a little different. You can actually listen to said drums if you follow this interactive experience with me. Follow along! Yay! Drums on the Sennheisers are the thinnest of the bunch. So, if you look around you and you find an open closet door, go ahead and give it a couple of smacks. That's exactly it. Drums on the 9500 sound a bit more hollow, but still on the thinner side of things. For this example, go ahead and close that door and smack it again. Last of all, drums on the 9600 are the thickest and deepest. So, use that same closed door, but knock on it with a moderate amount of strength instead. That's it. End of the interactive experience. Yay! So now let's jump into the mids. Female vocals on the 9500 are the most forward and thinnest by comparison. On the Sennheisers, the vocals are ever so slightly less forward, but also possess a slight bit of extra warmth to them. On the 9600, the vocals sound the most recessed by comparison and possess a very lush sound to them. Now, cellos are not exactly impressive on any of these in my opinion, but the 9500s produce the cello the best out of these three, since it possesses a very lightweight and airy sound to them, albeit too thin from what is natural. It also possesses the most amount of fine detail to the pizzicato. Now the Sennheisers reproduced this cello with a little bit more of a nasally twang to it, although the cello does still possess a decent amount of detail to it as well. Now on the 9600, the cello sounds very thick and lush, which makes it miss out on the finer details of every pluck or bow. So overall, my favorite mids of the bunch are the Sennheisers. The 9600 mid sounds smooth, but slow and sluggish. The 9500s sound livelier and energetic, but a bit too plain. And then the Sennheisers sit in between the two and offer energy and smoothness all the same. Although I did notice a little bit of harshness, particularly with saxophones. Now let's go ahead and jump into the treble. The 9500 are the most forward of the trio, while the 9600 are the most recessed. However, both SHPs possess lower quality treble responses by comparison. So a quick example, Bangarang by Skrillex featuring Syra. The HD560s and SHP9500s are about equally forward. However, the 9500 sound more jagged and harsh by comparison. Now, despite the fact that the HD560s do reign supreme at this category, they do have a certain shoutiness at the 26-second area and on, where the high-pitched voices start shouting at the beginning of every other measure. Both SHPs possess a certain level of granularity, but because the 9500s are more treble-heavy, this characteristic is far more apparent in them. Overall, while the 9500s do possess the most exposed treble response, it is also the grainiest and the most harsh. The 9600 possess the most recessed treble, but this can sometimes be a bit more of a benefit, especially with the timbre of cymbals. The Sennheisers possess the cleanest treble of the three, but it can be a tad shouty at times. Now for Soundstage and Imaging, this one is a bit wacky. The 9600 to me are the most narrow of the bunch. They sound pretty boxed in and cozy. The 9500 sound a bit more open and spacious, but you can still hear the limits of the soundstage. Last of all, the HD560s sound more like a very deep capsule. Like you can hear the limits of the soundstage, but the sounds are coming at you from very, very far away. Not that they sound wide per se, just far. As far as imaging goes, it is tough to declare an absolute winner since they do what they do so differently. I will say this though, to me, the HD560s edge out the SHPs in terms of imaging by a smidge. But if you ask me what my favorite soundstage is, I'd give it to the 9500. Now for some notes and observations, it is clear to see that the HD560s are perhaps the most tonally correct of the bunch, but that doesn't mean that the SHPs are losers. At least, not yet. With the 560s, there really weren't a whole lot of adjustments to be made, but I did want to adjust that slight shoutiness in the treble response, as well as provide a little bit of a bass shelf, just to let the already remarkable bass extension shine even more. With the 9500, the goal of the EQ is to primarily reduce the harshness and grain in the treble response. Although the harshness was only slightly remedied, the treble response as a whole now sounds a tad cleaner. Also, an added bass shelf to remedy the roll-off. You know how it is. With the 9600, the goal, well, I'll make it quick. It didn't really help, but did something. So, to conclude, the HD560s currently lie at around $200 from pretty much any major storefront except Amazon. That's almost twice the price of the 9600, which currently lie at around $100 to $130, and more than double the price of the 9500s, which are currently at $80 on Amazon. Links below, by the way. Yes, the HD560s are on a whole nother level than the SHPs. However, that's kind of like saying that the brown shoes are better quality than the blue shoes. It's like, well, that's great, but maybe I never wanted brown shoes in the first place. Maybe I was looking for blue shoes this entire time. So if we were to assume that prices are not a factor, I'll just put it in this way. That's what she said. Both of the SHPs color the sound more noticeably than the Sennheisers. If you're looking for a warm and relaxed listen, or if you want to listen to electronic/hip-hop music exclusively, the 9600s might be the way to go. If you want the detail and excitement above all else, or if you want to listen to acoustic tracks like rock, jazz, and classical, the 9500s are the ones to get. If, however, you want the jack of all trades that doesn't really favor one genre over another, if you want the truth in all its ugliness for better or worse, the 560s might be the ones for you. I'm running late for work, so I'm just gonna end the video here. Hopefully I helped answer your questions. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. You know what to do down below. Links to some extra replacement cables and stuff like that down below. Got the Patreon. Check me out on Amazon. Do what you do. So hopefully this video helped you out, and thank you very much for watching. I appreciate your time. Have a nice day.